Today, I'm going to be talking about working your players into the world. This is going to be using the backstory information that your players should have provided you between the previous lesson and this one. So make sure that you have that handy before you dive in. In order to make this course happen, I had 2 of my players provide me with backstories based on the handout that I created. And you should have access to that handout if you go back to the previous post and go to its associated blog post. With that handout, my players created backstories. It gave me really great details that I was able to use to expand the world of Elsewhere, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I did that today in this course. And you can use the advice that I give you here to work your players and their characters into your world, which will help you to expand the setting significantly and make sure that your player characters are going to mesh well with the world. The first thing that we want to do is break down the backstories into separate parts. Specifically, we want to split them into one part that is about world building and one part that is about character arc writing. Your players should have provided you with plenty of information that is going to help you world build and plenty of information that is going to help you write a character arc later on. The course for writing character arcs is going to take place later on in this series. Today we're just focusing on what's going to help us with world building. So look through the backstory information that you were provided by your players and pull out anything that has to do with the world and anything specifically that is going to add to your world. I have 2 player characters here. One of them is Reuven and the other is Philidius. Reuven being a high elven rogue and Philidius being a human wizard. Reuven is a well-traveled individual who hails from the lawless town of Creaky Dream, somewhere between Hendek Canyon and Kurgan. And the other lived in a log cabin somewhere in a Daysol, far to the northeastern edge of Elsewhere. However, Philidius would often visit a place called Walneck's Gorge on supply runs and things of that nature. If you're paying close attention specifically to my world map, you know that I don't have anything called Creaky Dream or Walneck's Gorge anywhere on my world map. And this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted my players to give me information in their backstories that required me to add things to my world. So these are places that I'm going to note down from the backstories that I need to add to my world and my map and start fleshing out a little bit more than what my players have provided in the backstories. I will also be noting down any other world building information that my players have provided to me. Things like people that they know, groups they've encountered, other locations that they visited, shops that they know about, anything that they have that was not previously in my world that they have noted in their backstory, I need to make a note of and add some details just based on what their backstory is, and then prepare to flesh it out later. Specifically, I want to add it to my map and create details for it, much like I've made details for places like Kesset in our first arc. I have found the following things from the player backstories I was given that I will use to build my world. If you're curious about the player backstories, I'm actually going to have copies of them available to you. You can go to the link in the description to my blog post associated with this part of the course, and at the bottom of that, you'll find a link to all of the resources associated with this part of the course. So I'm going to list here roughly what I have written out for what my players provided to me for world building purposes. Creaky Dream, a lawless town that rests between Hendek Canyon and Kurgan. It's filled with ruffians and criminals alike, serving as something of a safe haven for them, if Creaky Dream can ever be considered safe. No one dares try to tame this town, as such an attempt would likely cost the lives of many, many good soldiers. So instead, this wound is permitted to fester. So long as the vile inhabitants of Creaky Dream stay isolated to this town in the middle of nowhere, what harm do they pose? Walneck's Gorge, a small town in a Daysol where supplies are frequently available. Not many choose to live in the region of a Daysol, but those who do tend to depend on Walneck's Gorge for supplies and socialization. This town is named for the canyon strait that runs alongside it, which contains waters from the ocean several hundred feet down from the Great Wall of Stone atop which the town is constructed. Despite how high up the town proper is, Walneck's Gorge is a port town. You just have to dock at the bottom and carry your wares up several long, rickety steps. University of Central Elsewhere. In Kagaz, the capital of the Gurkiza region, there is a grand university where many come to study finance, trade, and other matters of business. Philidius is one such individual and excelled among his peers at the university. The University of Central Elsewhere has produced many merchants, accountants, and scribes in its several years serving the people of Elsewhere, and it seems to be poised to continue doing so for many years to come. The Soggy Sausage, a seedy, grimy, tavern-turned brothel that is operated by Reuven's brother, Arnwin. The sausage is built in the ill-regarded settlement of Alamay, which lies in Uri near the southern border that is shared with the swampy region of Bozal. The Soggy Sausage is by no means a popular attraction, and everyone insists they've never been, but Well, someone is giving it business. My players were also generous enough to provide me with many other backstory details, things like NPCs that they know. You can find all of that in the backstory PDFs, but I'm going to be extracting this and listing it out just like I did with the world building details, and using that information to build out the character arcs later on in this series. At least a few of the people that my players mentioned are actually involved in the first arc of Kesset. They specifically talked about people that they know who brought them to Kesset, or who told them to come and visit, or people they are just familiar with who happen to live in Kesset. These are individuals I can involve in the first arc, so not only have they helped me build out the world beyond Kesset, they've actually expanded the first arc as well and provided me with information I can use to make sure that their player characters mesh well with this arc and have a reason for being here in the first place. Now that you've pulled the details from the backstories your players provided to you, it's time to start working that into your world. You're going to use the same steps that we used in previous sessions, specifically the micro view session, to expand this world using the information that your players provided to you. For example, I'm going to create 2 new settlement information forms. One of them will be for Walneck's Gorge, and another is going to be for Creaky Dream. One of my players also mentioned another town called Alamay, where the Soggy Sausage is located. So I have 3 towns that I need to provide settlement information for. This is really going to help me expand my world significantly. And of course, the Soggy Sausage will be a point of interest within that place. How many times do I have to say? I'm pretty sure he just wanted to see me say Soggy Sausage on camera and see how many times I would say it. What a tavern name. Additionally, I already have a settlement information form for the city of Kagaz because I needed that for the first arc. However, I can now add another point of interest to that settlement information form, specifically the University of Central Elsver. This is where that player's character went to school, so it's a pretty important location that I need to make sure I have added and have some details for. Presuming that you are running a full campaign with more than 2 or 3 players, this could be a lot of work for you. I know that for me, in the current campaign I'm running, I have about 6 consistent players. Sometimes I've had 7. And getting all that information together and using the backstories they create to expand your world can be a lot of work. This is probably going to be the most amount of work that you have to do between different courses in this series. So what's next? Do not toss the player backstories to the wind. We're going to need them considerably for the rest of this series. First, you need to make sure that you list out every named individual from the backstory so that you can add them as notable inhabitants of different areas. Additionally, you want to make sure that you have a list of everything they provided for you that could contribute to the character arc they have. For example, their wants and their goals, where they've been, enemies that they've had, anything of that nature is going to contribute to creating a compelling character arc for them in a few sessions. If you find that there's not really enough to go on, go back to your players and tell them that you need a little bit more information. Maybe consider a couple of additional questions that you could ask each of the players that will give you more to work from. You just need to make sure that you have enough to work with to create a compelling character arc for each of the player characters when we get to that part of this series. At this point, you should have several settlements now. Instead of just the 1 or 2 that you created for the first arc of your campaign, you should now have those and settlements that your players have provided to you. You have a lot of information now and your world is really starting to take shape, and your players are now involved in that whole process. It's a pretty awesome thing. It's one of my favorite parts of creating a homebrew campaign. We're going to be adding more details to these places later on. In fact, I believe it's the next session when I'm going to talk about shops and notable inhabitants. These are more fields that we have available to us in the settlements, and now you have several settlements that need to be expanded and have more information added to them. So it's going to be a little bit more work, and the work is going to continue to snowball, but your world is just going to continue expanding and growing and taking on a life of its own through this process. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this video. I really appreciate it. If you did like this video and you want more of this series, please consider supporting me by subscribing and liking and commenting, all of the stuff that every YouTuber asks you to do. Additionally, you can follow me on social media. I am at TL Bainter on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, with Instagram being where I am most active if you want to follow me there. I hope you're looking forward to the rest of this series, and until the next part, bye.